100 Days, My Prince, A Forgotten Love, A Hidden Past, and the journey of a crown prince who lost his name but found his heart. There was a time when I lived in the palace, wrapped in silk and silence, carrying a name that belonged to duty more than to me. I was Crown Prince Lee Yulson of a king forged in blood and betrayal. My childhood ended not with age, but with a scream in the night and the fall of a noble house. I watched from the shadows as my father seized the throne, his ambition cloaked in justice. And I learned quickly, power could not be trusted, and even love had to be quiet. Before all that, there was her. She lived in a house filled with books and laughter. Yoon Yi-seo, daughter of a righteous scholar. I remember her as a blur of movement and fearless eyes. I was drawn to her even then, though I didn't understand why. We met under the cherry blossoms once, when everything still felt possible. And then everything was taken. Her family was accused of treason. I watched helplessly as her world was ripped apart. I never saw her again, though I carried her memory like a hidden scar. Years passed, and I wore the crown like armor. My heart grew quiet. My marriage was in name only, political, calculated. The palace was full of watchers. Nothing genuine remained, not even myself. One day, I passed a law to enforce marriage for all citizens. It was a careless decree, meant to quiet my ministers, but it changed everything. That was the beginning. I left the palace to investigate a growing unrest, a secret rebellion, whispers in the shadows. I followed the trail into the forest and walked straight into an ambush. The attack came fast. I remember pain, confusion, and the cold. And then nothing. When I awoke, I wasn't a prince. I wasn't anyone. My name was gone, and so was my memory. I was found by strangers and given a new name, One Duke. They said I had no home, no past. I believed them because I had nothing else. In a twist of irony, the marriage law I'd passed came back to find me. The villagers feared punishment if I remained single. The solution was as absurd as it was inevitable. I was to marry a woman I didn't know, in a town I didn't recognize, under a name that wasn't mine. Her name was Hong Shim. She resisted the match, and I did too, in my own way. But neither of us had a choice. She was strong-willed and practical, used to disappointment and survival. I was useless at first, refusing to work, confused by the simplest tasks, wondering why I knew how to read but not who I was. But she didn't pity me. Instead, she challenged me, tolerated me, pushed me to be better. And something in me shifted. In that small house, beside a woman who didn't care for my name, I began to live. I tried to chop wood and failed. Tried to carry water and spilled half of it. But I tried. Each morning, the sky felt more familiar. Her presence began to soothe something I hadn't known was broken. She planted herbs and taught children in the village. Her life was simple, but she moved through it with grace. She didn't ask for more than she needed. She didn't speak much of her past, but I saw it in her eyes, the quiet strength of someone who had survived being forgotten. Our days passed like that. Sometimes I caught myself watching her for too long, not because of her beauty, though she was beautiful, but because of the ache she stirred in me. She felt familiar, like a dream I had once lived in, like a voice I used to follow. And yet I didn't remember. Until I did. It came back slowly, pieces of a different world. My hand lifting a royal seal, a father's glare, a queen's cold touch, and then a memory I had buried so deep it had become part of my bone cherry blossoms, laughter, and a promise. I remembered her. I remembered everything. Yoon Yi-seo, Hong Shim, they were the same. The girl I once promised to marry, and the woman I now shared my days with. She hadn't recognized me, or maybe she had and kept it to herself. But I saw now what she had endured, her father's execution, her flight into anonymity, her struggle to survive alone in a world that had taken everything. And still she had chosen to live. I wanted to stay in that village forever, to live not as a prince, but as her husband. But the world didn't allow such wishes. The palace found me. I was dragged back into my former life, crown prince again, with all its cold formality. My return ignited chaos. The court had declared me dead. My enemies had begun to move. The Queen's father, Vice Premier Kim, had tightened his grip on power. I was no longer the man who had left. I had become someone else in those 100 days. Someone who knew the weight of hunger, the meaning of a kind word, and the ache of loving someone without being able to say it. And I loved her. I couldn't tell her that. I couldn't go back. Not yet. I watched from afar as she returned to her quiet life, the village unaware of the man she had loved and lost again. She lived with dignity, even in absence. I ruled with clarity, though it often broke me. Every decision I made as crown prince was shaped by the man I had been when I was with her. I spoke less but listened more. I saw the court not as a battlefield, but as a fragile house, built on the backs of forgotten people. The memory of her grounded me. I didn't reach out. I couldn't. Not when the palace was still full of secrets, not while my crown hung by threads of loyalty and deceit. But I held on to the thought of here of us, of a time when I didn't need a name to be loved. Returning to the palace felt like walking into another life. The walls loomed higher than I remembered, the air sharper, more suffocating. My robes were pressed, my title restored, and yet I felt like a stranger among my own people. The memory of Hero Hongshim, of Yiso lingered like the scent of wildflowers in spring. Everywhere I turned, she was not there. The court whispered of miracles, of fate, of schemes unraveled. But beneath the surface, they plotted as they always had. Power never slept, and those who held it rarely gave it up willingly. I had left behind the one place I had truly lived, only to return to a throne built on ash. Vice Premier Kim, my father-in-law by political arrangement, had long ruled from the shadows. He smiled with lips carved from ambition and wielded his daughter, the crown princess, as a tool more than a child. She bore my name, but not my heart. Between us stood secrets deeper than any bond. There had been a child, she claimed, but I knew it was not mine. The truth lay twisted beneath layers of palace lies, and soon it began to unravel. Muyeon Hongshim's brother had been at the center of it all, an assassin, a ghost among men. But beneath that name lived a man carved by guilt, fighting to protect what remained of his family. He had lived in shadows, done things I could not forgive, yet part of me understood. He had shielded his sister while the world hunted them. When the truth came to light of forged alliances, of murders disguised as justice, of a child conceived in deceit, the palace walls trembled. My resolve hardened. I did what I had to. Justice came slowly. It came not with fire, but with cold precision. The vice premier's fall was swift and inevitable. His sins had drowned generations, and I could not allow them to stain the throne any longer. The queen's position collapsed with him, and with their departure, a quiet settled over the court, not peace, but possibility. And yet, in the aftermath of it all, I stood alone. I had reclaimed my place, but lost the only person who made me feel human. I thought of her often. Of how she tied her hair at dawn, how she stood on tiptoes to hang herbs by the window, how she looked at me when I was no one and gave me meaning. A prince can be revered, obeyed, or even feared, but only she had looked at me and seen the man behind the name. I waited, days folded into weeks, then into months. I did not summon her. I could not reduce what we had to an invitation from a royal court. She had earned more than that. If she returned, it had to be by her own will, her own steps. The cherry blossoms bloomed again. I walked the gardens, now quieter than before, and remembered the promise of a boy to a girl beneath those same trees. I wondered if she remembered too, if that promise, made in innocence, still pulsed faintly in the corners of her heart. One morning I left the palace. Not with soldiers, not with servants, just myself. I followed the roads back to the village, past streams and foot-worn trails. The sky was wide and kind, and the earth no longer felt heavy beneath my feet. I passed familiar places, the old bridge where she once waited, and the hillside where I had slipped trying to gather firewood. I did not go to her house immediately. I simply walked through the village like I had before, pretending again to be no one. She was there, by the fields, bent low over the soil, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back just the same. She hadn't changed, not in any way that mattered, and yet she had. Her expression was steadier. Her eyes held years in their gaze. She had known loss and chosen to bloom anyway. I didn't approach her that day, nor the next. Instead, I sat beneath the same tree where I once rested, back when I was one duk. The villagers passed by without alarm. Some recognized me but said nothing. Perhaps they understood, perhaps they remembered too. Eventually, our paths crossed again, not through grand fate or royal design, but through the simplicity of morning errands and crossing footsteps. She looked at me, and in that moment we remembered everything. The 100 days, the silences, the stolen glances, the love that had grown between two strangers who were never strangers at all. I did not ask her to come with me. I did not speak at all. But she walked with me, through the village paths, through the memory of what we once were, and maybe through the possibility of what we could be again. I did not need to be a prince with her. I never had. With her, I was just a man who had once lost his way and been found, not by destiny, but by a woman who made her own.